Maya Chun had always been different from other xenobiology students at the Kepler Station Academy. While her classmates studied alien species from textbooks and holographic displays, Maya preferred hands-on experience. That's what led her to volunteer for the most dangerous assignment available, caring for the recently captured Dracorian specimen in the high-security research facility. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Standing nearly 12 feet tall when upright, its scales shifted between deep emerald and midnight black, depending on its mood. For powerful arms ended in claws that could slice through titanium, while its serpentine tail possessed enough strength to crush a small vehicle. Most intimidating of all were its 3 eyes, 2 large ones that glowed amber in the dim light, and a smaller third eye in the center of its forehead that seemed to see things others couldn't. Dr. Harrison, the facility director, had warned Maya repeatedly about the creature's dangerous nature. "This isn't some pet, Chun," he'd said during her first briefing. "Dracorians are apex predators from the Outer Rim territories. They've destroyed entire colonies. This one was captured during the siege of Proxima B, and it's only sedated, not tamed." Maya nodded respectfully during these lectures, but privately she disagreed with the facility's approach. She'd read every available report about Dracorians, and something didn't add up. If they were truly mindless destroyers, how had they developed space travel? How did they coordinate such complex military operations? There had to be more to their behavior than simple aggression. The creature was kept in a specially designed containment cell deep within the station's core. The walls were made of reinforced quantum steel, and an energy barrier hummed constantly around the perimeter. Automated feeding systems delivered standard nutrition blocks twice daily, while an array of sensors monitored every aspect of the creature's vital signs and behavior. Maya's job was supposedly simple: observe and record. She was to enter the observation chamber adjacent to the cell for 4 hours each day, take detailed notes about the creature's behavior, and submit her findings to the research team. What she actually did was quite different. On her first day, Maya noticed something the others had missed. The creature wasn't eating the nutrition blocks. They piled up in the corner of its cell, untouched and growing moldy. When she mentioned this to Dr. Harrison, he dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand. "The creature is probably on a hunger strike," he said without looking up from his tablet. "Many captured aliens go through a period of refusing food. It will eat when it gets hungry enough." But Maya wasn't convinced. She spent hours watching the creature through the observation window, noting how it moved, how it reacted to different stimuli, how its scales changed color. What she saw wasn't a mindless monster, but something that reminded her strongly of the tigers she'd studied during her undergraduate work on Earth. The Dracorian was depressed. It moved slowly around its cell in repetitive patterns that reminded Maya of the pacing behavior she'd observed in captive big cats. Its scales remained a dull gray-green most of the time, only flickering to brighter colors when something startled it. Most telling of all, it often sat in the corner farthest from the door, staring at nothing with what could only be described as a 1,000-yard stare. Maya made a decision that would change everything. On her third day of observation, she brought something the automated systems couldn't provide: junk food. She'd stop by the station's mess hall before her shift and grab a variety of snacks from the vending machines. Nothing fancy, just the kind of processed food that homesick humans craved when they were far from Earth. Chocolate bars, potato chips, sugar cookies, and a few cans of energy drinks. The security protocols for the facility were strict, but Maya had found a loophole. Personal items were scanned for weapons and dangerous materials, but food from a station's own mess hall was considered safe. She'd hidden the snacks in her jacket pockets and tool bag, hoping the guards wouldn't look too closely. When she reached the observation chamber, Maya's heart was pounding. What she was about to do violated at least a dozen regulations and could cost her not just her position at the academy, but her entire career in xenobiology. But something about the creature's obvious distress overrode her concerns about rules and safety. The Dracorian was in its usual position in the far corner, back turned to the observation window. Maya activated the intercom system that allowed limited communication between the chambers. Technically, it was only supposed to be used for official research purposes, but Maya had checked the duty roster and knew she wouldn't be disturbed for at least 2 hours. "Hey there," she said softly into the microphone. The creature's ears, which were more like small fins on either side of its head, twitched slightly, but it didn't turn around. "I know you probably can't understand me, but I wanted to try something different today." Maya pulled out the first item, a chocolate bar. The wrapper crinkled as she unwrapped it, and this time the creature did turn its head slightly. Maya held the chocolate up to the window so the Dracorian could see it, then activated the small transfer chamber that was normally used for passing research instruments into the cell. The transfer chamber was about the size of a lunchbox, with doors on both sides that could never be opened simultaneously. It was designed to prevent any possibility of direct contact between researchers and the contained specimen, but it would work perfectly for Maya's purposes. She placed the chocolate bar in the chamber, cycled it through the system, and watched as it appeared on the other side of the energy barrier. The small brown rectangle sat there innocuously on the chamber floor, looking completely out of place in the sterile environment. For several minutes, nothing happened. The Dracorian continued to watch Maya with what she was beginning to recognize as intelligent curiosity, but it made no move toward the chocolate. Maya was starting to think her plan was foolish when the creature suddenly stood up. Moving with surprising grace for something so large, the Dracorian approached the transfer chamber. It bent down and sniffed the chocolate delicately, its nostrils flaring. Maya held her breath, afraid that any sudden movement might spook the creature back to its corner. The Dracorian picked up the chocolate bar with surprising gentleness, holding it between two claws like a person might hold a fragile flower. It examined the brown square from every angle, occasionally bringing it closer to its nose to smell it more thoroughly. Then, to Maya's amazement, it bit into the chocolate. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The creature's scales flashed through a rapid sequence of colors, from deep emerald to bright gold to electric blue. Its 3 eyes widened, and it made a sound that Maya had never heard before, a low, rumbling purr that seemed to come from deep in its chest. Within seconds, the entire chocolate bar was gone. The Dracorian looked toward the observation window with what could only be described as hopeful anticipation, its tail swishing slowly back and forth like a contented cat. Maya's hands were shaking with excitement as she reached for the next item. The potato chips were next, and she quickly cycled them through the transfer chamber. The Dracorian pounced on them with even more enthusiasm, crunching through the salty snacks while its scales continued to shift through brilliant patterns of color. Over the next hour, Maya fed the creature everything she'd brought. The cookies disappeared in moments, leaving the Dracorian licking its claws to get every last crumb. The energy drinks were consumed in single gulps, causing another spectacular display of color changes that Maya was quickly learning indicated pleasure or excitement. But the most remarkable change wasn't in the creature's coloration. As it ate the junk food, its entire demeanor transformed. The listless, depressed animal Maya had been observing for days was replaced by something energetic and alert. The Dracorian began moving around its cell with obvious enthusiasm, occasionally performing what looked almost like playful leaps and bounds. Most importantly, it began to interact with Maya directly. Instead of ignoring her presence or showing fear, the creature now approached the observation window whenever she moved. It would press its clawed hands against the energy barrier and make soft rumbling sounds that reminded Maya of a cat purring. When Maya's shift ended, she found herself reluctant to leave. The Dracorian seemed to sense her departure, moving to the window and watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. For the first time since its capture, the creature looked truly alive. Maya knew she was taking an enormous risk, but she also knew she couldn't stop now. Whatever breakthrough she'd achieved with simple junk food was too important to abandon. She began planning her next visit, wondering what other Earth foods might appeal to the creature's palate. What she didn't know was that her actions had already triggered consequences far beyond the walls of the research facility. Deep in space, monitoring stations had detected unusual energy signatures emanating from the Kepler station. The same energy patterns that Dracorian ships use for long-range communication. The creature Maya was feeding wasn't just any random prisoner. It was Prince Zorax, third in line to the Dracorian throne, and its sudden behavioral changes had not gone unnoticed by the sophisticated monitoring equipment hidden within its scales. Every purr of contentment, every flash of happy coloration was being transmitted across the galaxy to a race that had never known kindness from other species. For the Dracorians, this transmission was as shocking as it was unprecedented. Their prince, captured during a raid that had gone catastrophically wrong, was not being tortured or experimented on as they had feared. Instead, the energy patterns indicated something they had no words for in their language: joy. In the council chambers of the Dracorian homeworld, military leaders debated the meaning of these signals. Some argued it was a trick, a clever form of psychological warfare designed to lure their rescue fleets into a trap. Others suggested their monitoring equipment was malfunctioning, because the idea that an alien species might show kindness to a captured enemy was simply beyond their understanding. But Prince Zorax's sister, General Lyria, had a different theory. She had been the closest to Zorax among his siblings, and she recognized the emotional patterns in his transmissions. Her brother wasn't just content, he was happy. Something or someone at that human facility was treating him with genuine care. This revelation sent shockwaves through Dracorian society. For over 1,000 years, they had been a nomadic warrior race, moving from system to system in search of resources and new territories to claim. Their interactions with other species had always followed the same pattern: conquest or destruction. The idea that another race might offer kindness instead of hostility challenged everything they believed about the nature of the universe. General Lyria faced a difficult decision. Dracorian military doctrine called for immediate rescue operations when a member of the royal family was captured. Their fleets were already mobilizing for an assault on the Kepler station that would leave thousands dead and the facility in ruins. But the energy patterns from her brother suggested something unprecedented might be happening. Against the advice of her military advisors, Lyria made a choice that would alter the course of galactic history. Instead of launching a full-scale attack, she would send a smaller reconnaissance force to observe the situation firsthand. If her brother was truly being treated well, perhaps there was an opportunity for something that had never existed before in Dracorian history: peaceful contact with another species. The orders went out across the Dracorian fleet network, encrypted in the complex battle language that served as their most secure form of communication. Within hours, ships began changing course, converging on a staging area just outside the human-controlled sector of space. Back on Kepler station, Maya was completely unaware of the galactic drama her simple act of kindness had triggered. She was too focused on planning her next interaction with the creature. She was starting to think of less as a specimen and more as a friend. She had stopped by her quarters after her shift to gather more snacks, this time expanding her selection to include some of the more exotic items available in the station's international food court. There were rice crackers from Japan, chocolate-covered insects that were a delicacy in several Earth cultures, and even some durian-flavored candy that most humans found revolting, but that she hoped might appeal to alien tastes. Maya had also done some research in the station's library, looking for any information about Dracorian dietary habits or preferences. What she found was frustrating in its lack of detail. Most of the reports focused on their military capabilities or their destructive raids. There's almost nothing about their culture, their society, or their biological needs beyond basic combat assessments. One report did mention that Dracorian digestive systems were remarkably adaptable, capable of processing a wide variety of organic compounds. This was attributed to their nomadic lifestyle, which required them to find sustenance on many different worlds. Maya took this as a good sign that her food experiments were unlikely to harm the creature, even if her choices seemed unconventional. She was so absorbed in her research that she almost missed the emergency alert that began flashing on her personal communicator. Station-wide announcements were rare, and emergency alerts were even rarer. Maya activated the message with a growing sense of unease. The face of Admiral Rodriguez, the station commander, appeared on her screen looking grim and exhausted. All personnel are advised that long-range sensors have detected unidentified vessels approaching our sector. These ships match the configuration of known Dracorian fleet elements. While their intentions are currently unknown, all departments should be prepared for possible evacuation procedures. Regular updates will be provided as the situation develops. Maya's blood ran cold. Dracorian ships approaching the station could mean only one thing. They were coming for their captured comrade, and if they followed their usual pattern, they would destroy everything and everyone in their path to retrieve him. Maya thought about the creature in the containment cell, probably wondering why she hadn't returned with more treats. The idea that it might be rescued by its own people should have been good news, but Maya had read enough reports to know that Dracorian rescue operations typically left no witnesses alive. She made another decision that defied all logic and protocol. Instead of heading to the evacuation staging areas like every other civilian on the station, Maya gathered her collection of snacks and headed back to the research facility. If these were going to be the creature's last hours in captivity, she wanted to make sure they were good ones. The corridors were filled with running personnel and flashing emergency lights, but Maya moved against the tide of evacuation toward the high-security levels. Her access card still worked, though she suspected that wouldn't be true much longer once the evacuation protocols fully activated. The research facility was eerily quiet compared to the chaos in the rest of the station. Most of the scientific staff had already been evacuated, leaving only essential security personnel and the automated systems running. Maya's footsteps echoed loudly in the empty hallways as she made her way to the observation chamber. The Dracorian was waiting for her. As soon as Maya entered the observation room, the creature approached the window with obvious excitement. Its scales shifted through patterns of gold and blue that Maya was learning meant happiness and anticipation. It pressed its hands against the energy barrier and made the rumbling purr sound that she found oddly comforting. "Hey there, big guy," Maya said softly, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. "I brought some new things for you to try." She began cycling the snacks through the transfer chamber one by one, watching as the creature's delight grew with each new taste. The rice crackers were a big hit, crunching satisfyingly between its powerful jaws. The chocolate-covered insects disappeared almost instantly, causing a brilliant display of surprised pleasure as the creature experienced the combination of sweet and savory flavors. But it was the durian candy that produced the most dramatic reaction. As soon as the creature bit into the pungent sweet, its scales exploded into patterns of color that Maya had never seen before. Waves of deep purple and silver rippled across its body while it made sounds of pure ecstasy. It was clearly the most delicious thing the creature had ever tasted. Maya was so absorbed in watching the creature's joyful reaction that she almost missed the subtle vibration that began running through the station's hull. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but it grew steadily stronger until it became an ominous rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Dracorian noticed it too. Its head snapped up, eyes focusing on something far beyond the walls of its cell. For a moment, its scales shifted to a pattern of deep red and black that Maya instinctively recognized as alarm or warning. Then, the creature did something that shocked Maya to her core. It approached the observation window and began making deliberate gestures with its hands, pointing at her, and then at the ceiling, repeating the motion over and over with obvious urgency. Maya didn't speak Dracorian, but the creature's meaning was unmistakably clear. Danger was coming, and she needed to get to safety. The vibrations were getting stronger now, and Maya could hear the distant sound of the station's defensive systems powering up. Through the facility's communication system, Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled with tension as he announced that the approaching Dracorian fleet had reached the outer defense perimeter. Maya looked at the creature that had been showing her such concern for her safety, even though it was trapped in a cell with no hope of escape. In that moment, she made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. She was going to free the Dracorian. Her hands shook as she accessed the containment system controls. Maya's security clearance wasn't high enough to shut down the energy barrier completely, but her access to the transfer chamber systems gave her another option. If she could overload the power coupling that fed the barrier generators, it might create a temporary window for the creature to escape. The Dracorian watched her work with obvious intelligence, its 3 eyes tracking her movements as she rerouted power systems and bypassed safety protocols. Maya wasn't sure if it understood what she was trying to do, but it made no aggressive moves, seeming to sense that she was trying to help. Warning alarms began blaring throughout the facility as Maya's modifications triggered multiple system failures. The energy barrier flickered and sparked, its steady hum becoming an erratic whine. Maya's fingers flew over the control panel, entering the final sequence that would overload the power grid. "I hope you remember this," she whispered to the creature as she initiated the shutdown sequence. "I hope you remember that not all humans are your enemies." The barrier collapsed in a shower of sparks and electromagnetic feedback that sent Maya sprawling. When she picked herself up off the floor, the cell was open and the Dracorian was free. For a heart-stopping moment, the massive creature towered over her, its claws gleaming in the emergency lighting. Maya realized how completely vulnerable she was, alone with a being that could easily kill her with a single swipe. Instead, the Dracorian gently touched her shoulder with one clawed hand, careful not to let its razor-sharp talons break her skin. It made a soft sound, almost like a whisper, and Maya somehow understood it was saying thank you. Then, the creature was moving, flowing through the facility corridors with predatory grace. Maya followed at a safe distance, watching as the Dracorian navigated the station's layout with surprising familiarity. It seemed to know exactly where it was going. They emerged onto one of the station's main observation decks, just as the first Dracorian ships became visible in the distance. The vessels were unlike anything Maya had ever seen, their organic curves and shifting surfaces making them look more grown than built. They moved through space with fluid motions that reminded her of swimming fish, completely unlike the rigid mechanical flight patterns of human ships. The Dracorian beside her made a complex series of sounds that might have been speech, and Maya was amazed to see lights beginning to flash on its scales in intricate patterns. It was communicating with the approaching fleet, she realized, transmitting some kind of message in a language of color and light. The response was immediate. The lead ship changed course, moving toward the station in a graceful spiral that brought it alongside the observation deck. A section of the ship's hull flowed open like a flower blooming, revealing a docking bay that perfectly matched the station's emergency airlocks. Maya watched in amazement as the Dracorian prepared to leave. Part of her wanted to say something, to wish it well, or ask it to remember their time together. But she sensed that words weren't necessary. The creature looked at her one last time, its scales showing patterns of gratitude and farewell that needed no translation. Then, it was gone, disappearing into its people's ship with fluid grace. Maya stood alone on the observation deck, watching as the Dracorian vessel detached from the station and began moving back toward the fleet. She expected the ships to leave immediately, their rescue mission complete. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The entire Dracorian fleet changed formation, arranging themselves in what Maya gradually recognized as a peaceful configuration. They weren't preparing to attack or retreat. They were waiting. Admiral Rodriguez's voice echoed through the station's communication system, filled with wonder and disbelief. "All stations, we are receiving what appears to be a first contact communication from the Dracorian fleet. They're requesting permission to establish diplomatic relations." Maya sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just occurred. Her simple act of sharing junk food with a lonely prisoner had somehow triggered the first peaceful contact between humanity and the Dracorians in recorded history. Outside the observation deck windows, the alien fleet waited patiently for humanity's response, their ships glowing softly in the darkness of space like distant stars. Maya realized that she had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary, though she had no idea how extraordinary it would truly become. The diplomatic meeting took place 3 days later in the largest conference room on Kepler Station. Maya had been included at the specific request of the Dracorians, though she still couldn't quite believe she was sitting at a table that would reshape galactic politics forever. Admiral Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, flanked by diplomats, military advisors, and xenobiologists who had been hastily assembled from across human space. Their faces showed mixtures of excitement, nervousness, and barely controlled fear. After all, they were about to negotiate with a species that had been humanity's most dangerous enemy for over a decade. Across from them sat 3 Dracorians who had arrived via shuttle from the fleet. Maya recognized Prince Zorax immediately, though he looked quite different in what she assumed was formal attire. Elaborate metallic decorations adorned his scales, and complex patterns of light played across his body in slow, mesmerizing waves. Beside him sat a slightly smaller Dracorian whose scales were primarily silver and blue. This was General Lyria, Zorax's sister, and the military leader who had made the unprecedented decision to pursue diplomacy instead of warfare. Her bearing was unmistakably martial, but her eyes held an intelligence that reminded Maya of the finest human generals she had studied in history classes. The third Dracorian was introduced as Speaker Thane, their equivalent of an ambassador or diplomat. Unlike the others, Thane's scales shifted constantly through subtle patterns that Maya was beginning to understand represented different emotional or linguistic nuances. It was like watching someone speak with their entire body. The initial hours of the meeting were tense and formal, with both sides carefully feeling out boundaries and testing reactions. Human translators worked frantically with newly developed language programs, while Dracorian communication specialists attempted to render their complex color speech into audible words. Maya mostly listened, occasionally taking notes, but feeling somewhat out of place among such high-ranking officials. That changed when Prince Zorax suddenly gestured toward her and began speaking in rapid, enthusiastic tones that set his scales ablaze with golden patterns. Speaker Thane translated, his own scales showing what Maya was learning indicated amusement. Prince Zorax wishes to express his gratitude to Maya-chan for her unprecedented kindness during his captivity. He says the small gifts of food she provided demonstrated something his people had never experienced from another species: compassion without expectation of reward. Admiral Rodriguez looked surprised. Gifts of food? Ms. Chun, I wasn't aware that feeding the prisoner was part of your assignment. Maya felt her cheeks burning as all eyes turned to her. It wasn't, sir. I acted outside of protocol because Prince Zorax seemed distressed and wasn't eating the standard nutrition blocks. General Lyria spoke for the first time, her voice carrying musical undertones that the translation system rendered as curiosity. What manner of food did you provide? Our monitoring equipment detected significant emotional elevation in my brother, but we could not determine the cause. Junk food, mostly, Maya admitted, feeling foolish. Chocolate, chips, cookies, energy drinks. Things I thought might taste different from what he was being given. The reaction from the Dracorians was immediate and dramatic. All 3 began making sounds that the translation system struggled to process, their scales flashing through rapid patterns of what appeared to be amazement and delight. Prince Zorax stood up and began what could only be described as an excited speech, gesturing enthusiastically while his scales cycled through brilliant displays of color. Speaker Thane was laughing as he translated. Prince Zorax says these junk foods are the most delicious substances he has ever consumed. He specifically asks about the durian candy and whether more might be available for trade negotiations. Maya couldn't help but smile. There's plenty more where that came from. Earth has thousands of different snack foods and candies. This statement caused another flurry of excited discussion among the Dracorians. General Lyria leaned forward, her scales showing intense patterns that the translation system identified as strategic interest. Maya-chun, she said carefully, would you be willing to demonstrate the preparation or acquisition of these food items? My people have subsisted on nutritionally efficient, but bland sustenance for generations. The concept of food designed purely for pleasure is foreign to us. Admiral Rodriguez intervened before Maya could answer. Ms. Chun is a civilian student, General Lyria. While we appreciate her role in this first contact, she's not qualified to serve as a cultural exchange specialist. Prince Zorax made a sharp sound that didn't require translation. His scales shifted to patterns of deep red and black that clearly indicated disagreement or anger. He spoke rapidly to Speaker Thane, who then addressed the human delegation. Prince Zorax respectfully suggests that qualifications are less important than results. Maya Chun achieved in 3 days what our peoples have failed to accomplish in decades of conflict: genuine understanding and goodwill. He formally requests that she be included in any cultural exchange programs that may develop from these negotiations. The next several hours saw the establishment of basic diplomatic protocols. Both sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire while formal negotiations continued. More importantly, they established a framework for what both species hoped would be the first successful, peaceful coexistence agreement between humanity and the Dracorians. Maya found herself appointed as an unofficial cultural liaison, a role that both thrilled and terrified her. Over the following weeks, she worked closely with Dracorian specialists to establish food exchange programs. What started as sharing snacks had evolved into a comprehensive study of how different species approach the concept of cuisine and pleasure eating. The results were fascinating. Dracorian nutritionists were amazed by humanity's development of foods that served no nutritional purpose beyond taste and enjoyment. Humans, in turn, learned that Dracorians had developed incredibly efficient but monotonous food production systems that prioritize survival over satisfaction. Maya's first major success came when she introduced the Dracorian delegation to ice cream. The frozen dessert's combination of cold temperature, sweet taste, and creamy texture produced such intense joy in Prince Zorax that he actually began levitating, an involuntary response that apparently occurred when Dracorians experienced overwhelming happiness. The video of a 12-foot alien floating 3 feet off the ground while eating a chocolate sundae became an instant sensation across human space. More importantly, it demonstrated to both species that peaceful interaction was not only possible, but could be genuinely enjoyable. However, not everyone was pleased with these developments. Maya began to notice increased security around the diplomatic areas, and she overheard conversations about hardline factions within both human and Dracorian military hierarchies who opposed the peace negotiations. Her suspicions were confirmed when Admiral Rodriguez called her to a private meeting in his secure office. The Admiral looked tired and stressed, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious concern. Maya, I want you to be aware that there are elements within both our militaries who view these negotiations as a mistake, he began without preamble. Some of our own generals believe we're being naive, that the Dracorians are simply buying time to prepare for a larger assault. Maya felt a chill of fear. What about the Dracorian military? Are they having similar problems? According to General Lyria, yes. Apparently, there's a faction led by someone called War Commander Vex who believes that any species showing kindness is displaying weakness that should be exploited. He's been pushing for the traditional rescue operation, destroy the station and everyone on it. The Admiral paused, studying Maya's reaction. The thing is, both sides are watching you and your interactions with Prince Zorax as a test case. If this cultural exchange program succeeds, it strengthens the position of those who want peace. If it fails, then the war continues, Maya finished quietly. Exactly, which is why I need to ask something difficult of you. General Lyria has proposed an extended exchange program where you would spend several weeks aboard their flagship, learning about Dracorian culture while teaching them about human customs. It would be incredibly valuable for the peace process, but it would also be extremely dangerous. Maya's heart pounded at the thought of living among the Dracorians for weeks. The logical part of her mind screamed that it was too risky, that she was just a student who had gotten in over her head. But another part of her remembered Prince Zorax's obvious depression in captivity and his joy when she had shown him simple kindness. "I'll do it," she said before she could talk herself out of it. The Admiral nodded slowly. "I hoped you'd say that, but I needed to be sure you understood the risks. If the hardline factions on either side succeed in derailing these negotiations, you could find yourself stranded in the middle of a war zone." 3 days later, Maya stood in the docking bay, watching a Dracorian shuttle approach the station. Her belongings fit in a single bag, mostly consisting of various Earth snacks and a portable food preparation kit that she hoped would allow her to continue her culinary diplomacy aboard the alien vessel. Prince Zorax met her at the airlock, his scales bright with patterns that she now recognized as excitement and welcome. The shuttle pilot was a new Dracorian she hadn't met before, whose dark purple scales and multiple scars suggested extensive combat experience. The flight to the Dracorian flagship took nearly an hour, giving Maya her first close look at the alien fleet. The ships were even more organic looking up close, their hulls seeming to ripple and flow like living tissue. Weapon ports were disguised as natural features, making it difficult to distinguish between passenger vessels and warships. The flagship itself was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest human vessels Maya had seen. Its hull was a deep emerald color that shifted subtly as they approached, and she could see smaller ships attached to its surface like remoras on a shark. Inside, the ship was unlike anything Maya had expected. Instead of the sterile corridors and mechanical aesthetics of human vessels, the Dracorian ship felt more like exploring the inside of an enormous tree. Walls curved organically, glowing with soft bioluminescent panels that provided gentle illumination. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something that reminded Maya of rain on summer grass. Prince Zorax led her through corridors filled with Dracorians going about their daily duties. Maya tried not to stare at the incredible diversity among the crew. While they all shared the basic four-armed, scale body structure, their sizes, colors, and scale patterns varied tremendously. Some were as small as humans, while others towered over even Prince Zorax. Maya's quarters were surprisingly comfortable, with a sleeping area that could be adjusted for human physiology and a workspace where she could prepare food demonstrations. More importantly, it had a large viewing port that offered spectacular views of the surrounding fleet and the distant stars. Her first formal presentation was scheduled for the ship's evening meal period. Maya had spent hours preparing, choosing recipes that would showcase the diversity of human cuisine while being simple enough to prepare with the ingredients available on the ship. The dining hall was enormous, capable of seating hundreds of Dracorians at tables that accommodated their unique body structure. When Maya entered carrying her portable cooking equipment, conversation gradually died away as curious crew members noticed the small human in their midst. Prince Zorax introduced her with great ceremony, his scales glowing with pride as he explained her role in the peace negotiations. Maya was touched to see that he credited her not just with being kind to him personally, but with opening the possibility for understanding between their species. Maya's first demonstration was simple, making chocolate chip cookies from scratch. She had brought ingredients from Earth, but she wanted to show the Dracorians the process of combining individual elements to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The Dracorians watched in fascination as she mixed flour, sugar, butter, and eggs into dough. Several of them asked questions about the purpose of each ingredient, clearly trying to understand the chemistry involved. When she added the chocolate chips, There were murmurs of recognition from those who had heard about Prince Zorax's experience with Earth confections. The smell of baking cookies had an immediate impact on the assembled Dracorians. Maya watched their scales begin shifting to patterns she was learning indicated pleasure and anticipation. By the time she pulled the first batch from the portable oven she had set up, the entire dining hall was filled with eager, hungry aliens. The reaction to the fresh, warm cookies exceeded even Maya's optimistic expectations. Dracorians throughout the hall made sounds of amazement and delight as they experienced the combination of sweet and savory flavors, the contrast between the soft cookie and the firm chocolate pieces, and the comforting warmth of freshly baked food. But the most remarkable moment came when an elderly Dracorian approached Maya with tears in her 3 eyes. Through a translation device, she explained that she was the ship's head nutritionist and had been responsible for feeding the crew for over 40 years. In all that time, she had never seen food bring such obvious joy to her people. "You have taught us something we did not know we were missing," the nutritionist said. "Food can be more than fuel for the body. It can be fuel for the spirit as well." Over the following weeks, Maya's cooking demonstrations became the highlight of the ship's daily routine. She taught Dracorian cooks how to make everything from pizza to ice cream sundaes, while learning about their own food preparation methods in return. What she discovered was both fascinating and sad. Dracorian cuisine had evolved during their species' transition from a planet-based civilization to a nomadic fleet-based society. Efficiency and preservation had become paramount, leading to the development of nutritionally perfect but flavorless protein blocks and vitamin supplements. The concept of seasonings, spices, or flavor enhancement had been gradually abandoned as unnecessary luxuries. Entire generations of Dracorians had grown up never experiencing the pleasure of a well-prepared meal. Maya made it her mission to change that. Working with the ship's nutritionists, she developed recipes that combined Earth cooking techniques with ingredients available in Dracorian food stores. The results weren't always successful, but each failure taught them something new about the intersection of their respective cultures. Her greatest triumph came when she successfully created a Dracorian version of pizza. Using a protein-rich dough made from ground nutrition blocks, topped with preserved vegetables from their hydroponics bays, and a cheese-like substance made from processed algae, it looked nothing like traditional Earth pizza. But the Dracorians who tried it reacted as if Maya had given them a piece of heaven. Prince Zorax was so delighted with the pizza that he insisted on learning to make it himself. Maya spent an entire afternoon teaching the massive alien to knead dough and spread toppings, laughing as he carefully tried to manage the delicate work with his large claws. "Maya," he said as they waited for their collaborative pizza to bake, "I understand now why my sister chose diplomacy over warfare. If we had destroyed your station as military doctrine demanded, we would never have learned that food could bring such joy. We would have lost something precious without ever knowing it existed." Maya was touched by his words, but she also felt a growing unease. Despite the success of her cultural exchange program, she had noticed increasing tension among the ship's crew. Conversations would stop when she entered a room, and she often caught groups of Dracorians engaged in what appeared to be heated discussions. Her concerns were confirmed when General Lyria asked to meet with her privately in the ship's command center. The military leader looked tired and stressed, her usually vibrant scale patterns muted and dull. "Maya, I need to inform you of a developing situation," Lyria began without preamble. "War Commander Vex has been building support among the more traditional elements of our military. He argues that the peace negotiations are a sign of weakness, and that the joy our people have found in your food demonstrations is evidence that we are becoming soft." Maya felt her stomach clench with worry. What does that mean for the negotiations? For the peace process? Vex is planning to force a confrontation. Intelligence reports suggest he is moving his fleet toward this position, ostensibly to rescue Prince Zorax from what he claims is human psychological manipulation. In reality, he intends to destroy the diplomatic mission and resume the war. The general paused, her scales shifting to patterns that Maya had learned indicated deep concern. There is something else. Vex has declared that any Dracorian who has been contaminated by human influence must be purged for the good of the species. That includes everyone who has participated in your food demonstrations. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. How many Dracorians would that include? Nearly the entire crew of this ship. Over 3,000 souls. The magnitude of the situation hit Maya like a physical blow. Her simple act of sharing junk food had somehow escalated into a civil war that could destroy any hope of peace between humanity and the Dracorians. "What can we do?" she asked quietly. General Lyria's scales brightened slightly with what Maya recognized as determination. "We fight for what we believe is right. The question is whether humanity will stand with us when War Commander Vex arrives." Maya thought about Admiral Rodriguez back on Kepler Station, about the human military leaders who had been skeptical of the peace negotiations from the beginning. Would they be willing to risk human lives to protect Dracorian civilians? "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think I should return to Kepler Station to help make that argument." "No," Lyria said firmly. "Your presence here is what legitimizes our position. If you leave now, Vex will claim that humans abandoned us as soon as the situation became difficult. Your courage in staying despite the danger will be remembered by our people for generations." Maya realized that she had somehow become the symbol of everything the peace faction represented. Her choice to stay or leave could determine not just the fate of the negotiations, but the future relationship between their species. Outside the command center's viewing ports, the stars wheeled slowly in the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, War Commander Vex was approaching with a fleet of hardline Dracorians who viewed any form of compromise as betrayal. And somewhere else, human military leaders were deciding whether to risk their forces for the sake of aliens who had been their enemies just weeks before. Maya Chun, xenobiology student turned accidental diplomat, found herself at the center of a crisis that would determine the fate of two civilizations. The weight of that responsibility should have crushed her, but instead, she felt a strange calm. She had started this whole situation by showing kindness to a lonely prisoner. Whatever happened next, she was determined to face it with the same compassion that had brought her this far. "I'm staying," she told General Lyria. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The Dracorian general's scales flashed with patterns of gratitude and respect. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the mortals below. But in the command center of a Dracorian flagship, two beings from different worlds stood united in their commitment to something greater than themselves. The future hung in the balance, waiting to see whether compassion could triumph over fear, whether understanding could overcome hatred, and whether a shared love of chocolate chip cookies could be enough to prevent a war. Within hours, they would have their answer. War Commander Vex arrived with a fleet that blotted out the stars. Maya watched from the command center as hundreds of Dracorian warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming black and crimson in the light of distant suns. These vessels were different from General Lyria's ships, more angular and aggressive, designed purely for war rather than exploration or diplomacy. The communication that came from Vex flagship was broadcast on open channels for all to hear. The war commander's voice was harsh and guttural, filled with contempt as he spoke in the ancient battle language of his people. Speaker Thane provided translation, his own scales pale with fear. War Commander Vex demands the immediate surrender of Prince Zorax and the execution of all Dracorians who have been contaminated by alien influence. He gives us 1 hour to comply before he opens fire. General Lyria's response was swift and defiant. Her scales flashed with brilliant patterns of red and gold as she activated the fleet-wide communication system. Maya couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. They would not surrender. The hour that followed was the longest of Maya's life. Both fleets maneuvered for position while frantically sending messages to allies and neutral parties throughout the galaxy. Maya found herself in the strange position of helping to coordinate with Kepler Station, serving as a bridge between species that were about to go to war over her simple act of kindness. Admiral Rodriguez's response, when it came, was both surprising and inspiring. The human fleet is moving to support General Lyria's forces. We cannot stand by while civilians are threatened for the crime of choosing peace over war. Maya felt a surge of pride in her species, followed immediately by crushing guilt. Human ships were about to face Dracorian weapons because of choices she had made. If people died in the coming battle, their blood would be on her hands. Prince Zorax seemed to sense her anguish. He approached her carefully, his massive form moving with unusual gentleness. "Maya-chun," he said in his carefully practiced English, "you must not blame yourself for this conflict. Vex has opposed peace for decades. You merely provided him with an excuse to act on his existing beliefs. But if I hadn't fed you those snacks, if I hadn't started this whole cultural exchange program, then my people would have remained ignorant of the joy that comes from treating food as more than mere fuel." Prince Zorax interrupted. "We would have continued our endless cycle of conquest and destruction, never knowing that another path existed." Maya looked out at the assembled fleets, human and Dracorian ships preparing to fight side by side against a common enemy. It was an alliance that would have been unthinkable just months ago, born from the simple recognition that some things were worth fighting for. The battle began without warning. War Commander Vex's forces struck first, their weapons systems targeting General Lyria's flagship with devastating precision. The ship rocked under the impact of plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, its organic hull rippling as damage control systems fought to maintain structural integrity. Maya was thrown to the floor as another salvo hit the ship's port side. Emergency lighting cast everything in eerie red shadows while alarms wailed throughout the vessel. She could hear the sounds of combat echoing through the corridors as the crew rushed to battle stations. General Lyria's fleet responded with coordinated strikes against Vex's advanced ships. The Dracorian vessels moved with predatory grace, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the heavier weapons of the traditionalist forces. But they were outnumbered nearly 3-1, and Maya could see that the battle was going badly. That's when the human fleet arrived. Admiral Rodriguez had brought every available ship from the Kepler Station Defense Force, along with reinforcements from 3 nearby star systems. The human vessels were smaller and less elegant than the Dracorian ships, but they made up for it with superior firepower and advanced shield technology. The arrival of human reinforcements changed the dynamics of the battle immediately. War Commander Vex found his forces caught between 2 enemy fleets, his numerical advantage negated by the need to fight on multiple fronts. Maya watched the battle unfold on the command center's tactical displays, her heart pounding as she saw the symbols representing individual ships wink out one by one. Each lost vessel meant hundreds or thousands of lives ended, careers cut short, families destroyed. The weight of responsibility threatened to crush her. Then Prince Zorax did something that changed everything. He activated his personal communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies, speaking in the formal ceremonial language that all Dracorians understood regardless of their political allegiances. Speaker Thane translated in whispered tones. Prince Zorax is invoking the ancient right of royal challenge. He's calling for single combat between himself and War Commander Vex to settle the dispute without further bloodshed. Maya stared at the massive alien in shock. Can he do that? Is it legal under Dracorian law? It is binding if Vex accepts, General Lyria replied, her scales showing patterns of hope mixed with deep concern. But Vex is one of our greatest warriors. Zorax is brave and intelligent, but he has never been a fighter. The response from War Commander Vex came within minutes. His harsh laughter echoed across the communication channels as he accepted the challenge, clearly confident in his ability to defeat the prince in combat. The terms of the duel were quickly negotiated. Both fleets would withdraw to neutral positions, while the 2 champions fought aboard a designated neutral vessel. The winner would determine the fate of the peace negotiations and the future of Dracorian society. Maya felt helpless as she watched Prince Zorax prepare for combat. The gentle creature who had learned to make pizza with such enthusiasm was about to face a seasoned warrior in a battle to the death. "There has to be another way," she said to General Lyria. "Zorax is walking into a trap. Vex will kill him." "Perhaps," the general replied sadly. "But by accepting the challenge, my brother has shown courage that will be remembered by our people. Sometimes the example we set is more important than the victory we achieve." Maya couldn't accept that. There had to be something she could do, some way to help tip the scales in favor of peace. Then, she remembered something Prince Zorax had said during their cooking lessons, a casual comment about Dracorian biology that might be the key to everything. "General Lyria, is it true that Dracorian combat performance can be affected by diet?" Prince Zorax mentioned something about certain foods affecting reaction speed and coordination. Lyria's scales shifted to patterns of curiosity. "Yes, our metabolism is highly sensitive to nutritional inputs. Warriors traditionally fast before combat to ensure optimal performance." "Why do you ask?" Maya's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. What if Prince Zorax didn't fast? What if we could find foods that would enhance his performance instead of limiting it? "Such foods do not exist in our dietary catalog," Lyria said doubtfully. "Our nutritionists have studied combat enhancement for centuries." "But they've never studied Earth foods," Maya replied with growing excitement. "I've noticed that certain snacks seem to have unusual effects on Dracorian physiology. Remember how Prince Zorax started levitating when he first tried ice cream? That suggests the sugars and proteins in Earth foods interact differently with your biochemistry than your traditional nutrition blocks." General Lyria's eyes widened with understanding. "You believe you can create a food that will enhance my brother's combat abilities?" "I won't know until I try, but it's worth a shot." "How much time do we have before the duel?" 4 hours to reach the neutral vessel and complete the pre-combat ceremonies." Maya was already moving toward the food preparation areas. "Then, we better get started. I'm going to need access to your ship's entire food stores, plus anything unusual you might have picked up during your travels." The next 3 hours were a frantic blur of experimentation and testing. Maya worked with the ship's nutritionist to analyze the chemical composition of every snack food she had introduced to the Dracorians, looking for patterns in how different compounds affected their physiology. What she discovered was remarkable. Earth-based caffeine had a stimulative effect on Dracorian nervous systems that was nearly 10 times stronger than in humans. Certain amino acids found in chocolate created enhanced focus and reaction speed. Most intriguingly, the capsaicin in spicy foods seemed to trigger temporary increases in Dracorian strength and endurance. Working with these discoveries, Maya created what she privately thought of as a warrior's feast, a carefully balanced combination of high-energy Earth foods designed to maximize Prince Zorax's combat performance without making him sick. The final concoction was unlike anything she had ever made before. Energy bars infused with concentrated caffeine from coffee beans, dark chocolate loaded with performance-enhancing amino acids, and spicy peppers preserved in a honey-based syrup that would provide quick energy. Prince Zorax consumed the specially prepared foods just before boarding the shuttle to the neutral vessel. Maya watched anxiously for any signs of adverse reaction, but the prince seemed energetic and alert without any obvious side effects. "How do you feel?" she asked as they prepared to dock with the neutral ship. "Different," Prince Zorax replied thoughtfully. "More aware somehow. My thoughts feel sharper, and my body feels ready." He paused, studying her with obvious gratitude. "Thank you, Maya-chan. Whatever happens in the coming battle, I will face it knowing that I have a friend who cares enough to help." The neutral vessel was an ancient Dracorian ceremonial ship, its halls decorated with the history of countless duels fought to settle matters of honor and law. Representatives from both fleets gathered to witness the combat, their scales showing patterns of tension and anticipation. War Commander Vex was everything Maya had expected, Massive even by Dracorian standards, covered in battle scars, his scales intimidating black and crimson. His weapons were traditional Dracorian bladed instruments that looked capable of cleaving a human in half. Prince Zorax appeared smaller by comparison, but Maya noticed something the others missed. His movements were fluid and precise in a way she had never seen before. The combination of food she had prepared seemed to be enhancing his natural coordination and reaction speed. The duel began with ancient formalities, both warriors saluting their witnesses and stating their causes. Then they engaged in combat that was both beautiful and terrifying to watch. Vex fought with the aggressive style of a seasoned warrior, his blades moving in deadly arcs designed to overwhelm his opponent through sheer force. But Prince Zorax fought differently, using speed and precision to avoid the war commander's attacks, while striking back with surgical accuracy. Maya realized she was holding her breath as she watched the battle unfold. The enhanced foods seemed to be working. Prince Zorax was moving faster than should have been possible, his reactions anticipating Vex attacks by fractions of seconds that made all the difference. But Vex was experienced and cunning. As the battle progressed, he began adapting to Prince Zorax's enhanced speed, using feints and misdirection to create openings. A blade sliced across the prince's shoulder, drawing luminous blue blood that sparked against the ceremonial chamber's floor. The crowd of witnesses made sounds of concern, but Prince Zorax seemed unaffected by the wound. If anything, he moved even faster, the pain triggering some additional response to Maya's carefully crafted food combination. The turning point came when Vex attempted a traditional finishing move, a powerful overhead strike designed to split an opponent from head to tail. Prince Zorax moved aside at the last possible moment, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to avoid the blow by mere inches. As Vex's blade struck the floor where the prince had been standing, Zorax executed a perfect counterattack. His weapon found the gap in Vex's armor at the base of his neck, striking with precision that ended the war commander's life instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. War Commander Vex, legendary warrior and leader of the traditionalist faction, lay dead on the ceremonial floor. Prince Zorax stood victorious, his blade glowing with the bioluminescent blood of his fallen enemy. According to ancient law, the duel's outcome settled the matter completely. The traditionalist faction was bound to accept the peace negotiations, and any Dracorian who continued to oppose diplomacy would be considered a rebel against royal authority. Maya felt a mixture of relief and horror as she realized what she had accomplished. Her food preparation had helped Prince Zorax win a battle that would determine the fate of two species, but she had also contributed to the death of another sentient being. Prince Zorax seemed to understand her conflicted feelings. As they returned to the flagship, he spoke quietly about the burden of taking a life, even in a just cause. War Commander Vex chose his path long ago, he said. Today's battle was merely the culmination of decisions he made years before we met. You gave me the strength to defend what we both believe in, but the choice to fight was mine alone. The aftermath of the duel was swift and decisive. The traditionalist fleet surrendered and accepted integration into General Lyria's command structure. More importantly, delegations from across the galaxy began arriving to witness the unprecedented peace negotiations between humanity and the Dracorians. Maya found herself at the center of it all, no longer just a cultural exchange specialist, but a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species chose cooperation over conflict. Her food preparation techniques became the foundation for a new field of study, interspecies culinary diplomacy. 6 months later, Maya stood in the Grand Hall of the first joint human-Dracorian diplomatic station, watching representatives from dozens of worlds sample foods from both cultures. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining human technology with Dracorian bioarchitecture to create something neither species could have built alone. Prince Zorax approached her, carrying a tray of what had become his favorite Earth delicacy, chocolate chip cookies fresh from the ovens that Maya had helped design for the station's kitchens. Maya, Chun, he said formally, using the ceremonial tone that indicated he was about to make an important announcement. The Dracorian Royal Council has voted to award you the highest honor our people can bestow on an outsider. You are hereby named Friend of the Crown, with all the rights and privileges that title entails. Maya was speechless as Prince Zorax placed a beautiful crystalline pendant around her neck. The pendant caught the station's lighting and reflected it in patterns that reminded her of Dracorian scale displays. "This is too much," she finally managed to say. "I just shared some snacks with a lonely prisoner. Everything else grew from that." "Yes," Prince Zorax agreed, his scales showing patterns of amusement. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the largest consequences. Your junk food changed the course of galactic history." Maya looked around the hall, watching humans and Dracorians working together, sharing meals and stories, and gradually building the foundation for a lasting peace. Children from both species played together in specially designed areas, their laughter echoing through the corridors. It was hard to believe that all of this had started with chocolate bars and potato chips shared with a depressed alien in a prison cell. But perhaps that was the point. Peace didn't require grand gestures or brilliant strategies. Sometimes it just required one person willing to show compassion to another. Admiral Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, carrying his own plate of the fusion cuisine that had become popular throughout the station. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" he said, nodding toward the mixed crowd of humans and Dracorians. "It is," Maya agreed, though I never expected my xenobiology degree would lead to a career in diplomatic catering. The Admiral laughed. "The universe has a way of surprising us all. By the way, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. We've received inquiries from several other species who are interested in establishing diplomatic relations. Apparently, word has gotten out about your unique approach to first contact." Maya felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness. "What kind of species?" "The crystalline collective from the Andromeda sector, the hive mind networks of the outer spiral, and something called the void swimmers that we don't know much about yet. All of them specifically requested cultural exchange programs based on food sharing." Maya grinned, already imagining the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. "I suppose I better start researching their dietary requirements." As if summoned by their conversation, Speaker Thane approached with his scales showing patterns of excitement. "Maya-chan, I bring news from the outer territories. 3 more species have requested to join our diplomatic alliance. They wish to experience what they call the magic of shared meals that has brought peace between humans and Dracorians." Maya looked out through the station's massive viewing ports at the stars beyond. Somewhere out, there were countless species, many of them probably locked in conflicts that seemed irreconcilable. But if her experience had taught her anything, it was that the barriers between different peoples often crumbled when they sat down to share a meal together. "Well then," she said, raising her glass of the fruit punch that had become popular among both humans and Dracorians, "I guess we better get cooking." Prince Zorax raised his own glass in salute. "To Maya-chun, who taught the galaxy that sometimes the best weapon is a chocolate chip cookie." The toast echoed throughout the hall as humans and Dracorians celebrated together, their voices joining in harmony. Outside, more ships arrived each day, carrying diplomats and cultural specialists from worlds across the galaxy. The age of endless warfare was ending, replaced by an era of cooperation that had begun with the simple act of sharing snack food with a hungry alien. Maya smiled as she watched the celebration continue around her. She had started her journey as a xenobiology student trying to understand alien behavior. She had ended it as an accidental architect of galactic peace, proof that sometimes the most important discoveries came not from laboratories or textbooks, but from the simple recognition that all sentient beings, regardless of their species, needed companionship, kindness, and occasionally something sweet to eat. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities that none of them could have imagined when Maya first unwrapped that chocolate bar in a prison cell. It was going to be quite an adventure,